Hello, hello. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining me tonight for Natural Medicine Week 2022. I really appreciate your time tonight. So let's start with why we're here. So my talk for tonight is actually about the key to influencing your genes for complete health and wellness. This is a topic that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's actually quite an important topic and ironically quite an easy one as well. It's not something that we think that we have any influence over, but when we actually look at our genes, we can see really how easy it is. So let's get into it. All right, so firstly, a little bit about me. I'm Alice. My business is obviously Kinesiology, and first and foremost, I am a wife and a mother of 2 teenage children. I am an integrative complementary medicine therapist, holistic kinesiologist, and mind-body medicine practitioner. And all of that is just a lot of words to say that my job is to interpret what your body's telling me and to help you on the path to complete health and wellness. I am an ambassador for the Australian Traditional Medicine Society. I've actually been an ambassador for, I think this is my 3rd year now. And I'm also the president of the Australian Kinesiology Association. So the reason I belong to a couple of associations is because they give me different things. ATMS gives me contact with other types of practitioners in my field. And obviously the Kinesiology Association gives me access to kinesiologists and also professional development specifically for kinesiologists. So in this webinar, which you would have seen this information when you registered, so I'm going to be teaching you about why you can influence your genes, how you can do it, and also how easy it is. So, and what I really would like you to understand particularly is that just eating well and taking your vitamins and exercising and all of that stuff is really important. But it actually isn't the key to really influencing your health and wellness on all levels, and particularly your genes as well. We can eat well, we can exercise well, we can, move well, but if we aren't actually addressing underlying concerns with things, then we tend to struggle a little in being able to achieve true health and wellness. So it's very important for everyone to know that. Okay, so your body has this amazing gift of being able to heal itself. And we know this because, you cut yourself, your body heals itself. It's got this innate wisdom. It doesn't need to be told how to do that. It just does it. But over time, over many centuries, we've actually forgotten a lot of this innate wisdom that we have, or we don't recognize it anymore. And kinesiology is the master key for you to be able to unlock any blocks or patterns that are getting in the way of you achieving your full potential. And the potential is on all levels, and that's what kinesiology addresses. So mind, body, and spirit. So we tend to focus very much on the body, which is obviously your physical structure, and we focus more on the mind than we used to, which is more about how you think and your values and your ego even. We don't always focus on the spirit, which is really, it's your soul, right? It's the essence of who you are, your beliefs and your intuition, that gut instinct that we all have. So a lot of things that we do when we've got a bit of a problem is actually look at it on a very body physical sort of level. Sometimes we'll look at it on the mental level, and not always we look at the spiritual level, but kinesiology looks at all of these at once, because by bringing the unconscious to conscious awareness, we actually have an excellent opportunity to really influence the course of our lives. So how many times have you heard it's in my family or it's in my genes? And how often have you believed that and you just accept that that is your fate in life and there is nothing that you can do to control that? So if that was true, we would have died out as a species a long time ago, because we do have a level of control over how our lives go. So, and genes, they're not this superpower that just control us. They're actually just coding. They're like the program for a computer, if you're into any type of programming. And, you know, I don't know if you did know that, but what if I told you that you're actually not the victim of your genes, and that you actually have a level of power to switch them on and off? And what if I told you it was easy, and all you needed was consistency? Would you do it? Would you take that power? So the easiest way to explain your genes is actually like cake ingredients, right? You've got butter, you've got sugar, you've got eggs, you've got milk, and you've got whatever else it is you want to make in your particular type of cake, right? But until you actually do something with these ingredients, they are just ingredients. They're not a cake. So, and your genes are exactly like this. They're just the ingredients. It's what we choose to do with our coding system that actually makes it into a problem or not. So when we look at this new concept, well, it's not new, but it's fairly new to a lot of people, a concept called epigenetics, right? Which is basically environmental factors that affect your genes. So we have epi, which means actually above, and then we have this thing called epigenetic control, which is control above your genes. So what actually combines these ingredients into a cake? And that is an action. So very often we look at emotions as being separate to other parts of our body. So we've got our body stuff going on, and then we've got these emotion things sitting over here, and we kind of think of them as this separate entity, and they're actually not. We find emotions replicated in everything in our body. We see them in the chemistry of our body, in hormones and neurotransmitters. We even actually see them in our body structure and posture and how we hold ourselves. And I'll just explain that a little bit further. So if you think about, we know a lot about body language these days, so you know when someone's angry. And so, you know, you can see it, they're tight and they're tense and stuff. And so we see that, but also what's happening internally is actually changes in their hormones and neurotransmitters. And we know very much about the production of cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So pretty much anything that doesn't make us happy makes us stressed. So we tend to have stress hormones floating around to some degree all the time, depending on how we live our lives. But then we also see other things like sadness and fear. So people tend to sort of, you know, close in on themselves almost. And so that sets off a hormone cascade in your body as well. And so, you know, your body's trying to interpret all of this information. And then we've got, you know, just a person that is brokenhearted, and they will literally almost be like this. Yeah, because they're trying to protect themselves from further hurt. And again, there's a hormone and neurotransmitter cascade that comes from this. And then we've got the person who's quite open-hearted and, you know, happy and all of that sort of thing, and very relaxed body posture. And again, there's a hormone and neurotransmitter cascade that comes from this as well. And this is actually really important for you to understand, because your emotions trigger everything. They trigger how your gut behaves, they trigger how your brain behaves, and they trigger this chemistry in your body all the time. Now, when we come back to cells, which is where our genes and our coding comes from. So we think there's a few things in our cell that are quite important. We think it's the nucleus, which is the center of the cell here. And then we also think that it's things like our DNA and our mitochondria, and, you know, all of these other little bits in our little soup here of cellular structure. And it actually isn't any of those that's the most important. This stuff's your coding, right? This is your ingredients for your cake. So what actually influences that is, ironically, this cell membrane. And the cell membrane, that structure is really underutilized, really underestimated in what it does. So this cell membrane actually interprets the environment in which it lives in order to give information to your soup in here so that it can work out what's going on. So if you've got all of these, you know, things happening in your body, which might be physical stress sorts of things, but very much emotional stress, then your cells actually respond accordingly and get involved themselves in the production of hormones and neurotransmitters. And this is where we have the opportunity to switch these codes on and off. It's in here. And if you actually think about your body, you're just trillions of cells. So they're all very tightly packed together, but you're just trillions of cells. So every time that we sit in a poor emotional state, our cells are reading that information and then they're giving it into the nucleus, and then the cells are replicating with this information. They're talking to each other with this information. And soon enough, we end up with this information all through our body. So we actually see this replicated in nature. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Masaru Emoto's work. He's actually a Japanese scientist, and he actually studied extensively the cellular structure of water. And the reason that this is important to us is because we are anywhere between, depending on what you read, 60 to 80% water, and different parts of our body are a very large chunk of water as well. So this study, these types of studies are actually quite important. So if you can see here, we've got a few pictures, and what happened with this particular study is that Masaru took water and kept it, I think he froze it for 24 hours and then defrosted it and put it in different petri dishes, and then basically was nice to the water or not, effectively. And then he took these cannot think of the word, my goodness, microscopic pictures of the cellular structure of water, right? So this one here is about love and gratitude. So he actually sent love and gratitude thoughts to this molecular structure here. And you can see it's got this really beautiful snowflake type structure to it. So really quite connected. And if you actually look at that particular one, it's got a little nucleus in the middle itself, so which represents obviously the self in the way that we look at it. Now this water here, look at it, that was just told, you disgust me. And look at how, now remember that this water all came from, it was the same lot of water that he actually did this with, right? So you disgust me. And this water it's just broken apart. It's dirty. It doesn't really have any proper shape or form. Then we've got this one here, which was about eternal. So about being eternally loved, basically. And it's almost got this light in the middle of it. But again, like the love and gratitude one, it's got a very good cellular structure, and it's quite well formed and cohesive. And we've got peace here, which is a similar sort of thing. And we can see, if we think about this in the emotional sense as well, you know, all of these are slightly different, but they're all, you know, nice things to have, yeah? And then we've got down the bottom, we've got evil. So sending evil thoughts and vibes towards this water. And if you actually look at this, it's got this big black hole in the middle of it, and it almost looks like an evil eye. And then we've got this nice one here, which comes back again to this cohesive structure. And this one is called thank you. So just, you know, showing gratitude towards the water, thanking it for being water effectively. And again, the nice cohesive cellular structure, and it's really quite beautiful. So now the reason that this work is particularly important is, again, because we've got so much water within us. If we are being unkind towards ourselves, look at what we're doing to ourselves in every cell of our being. So if you're not familiar with his work, there's hundreds more photos of this stuff. So you can actually just Google it and have a look at a lot more of these structures. I don't know if anyone's ever done that experiment with their kids where you get two plants, or you actually cook rice and then split it into two jars. That's actually based on this principle as well. So you can do this with two plants, be nice to one and not be nice to the other. And even with the rice, boil the water and boil the rice in the same water and split that into two jars, and be nice to one set of rice and be mean to another set of rice. And you will actually see the change in about a couple of weeks. So obviously the plant that you're mean to will start to droop, although I'm not particularly good with plants myself, I have to say, but also with the rice. So the rice ones that I have seen is we've got this very, you know, nice white fluffy rice that holds its structure, and then the other rice actually turns this awful yellow. It actually looks a bit like this sort of color. It's awful. So, and it actually starts to break down. So in terms of affecting your genes, this stuff is quite important. Okay, so are you getting the picture here? So the cells that house your DNA, your genes, are actually influenced by your experience of the world, so and how you choose to interact with your world. So you're being influenced, your genes, that soup that I was talking about, are actually being influenced by the cell membrane around the cells, which interprets the environment in which it lives. Now that's your internal world. It's also your external world too. So if you choose to interact, I guess, with a world that looks more like this on the right, that's going to have an influence. And if you choose to interact with the world that looks a little bit more like this on the left, a bit more color and life, and then that's going to actually affect how your genes express. So genes come from our family lineage. So, and some genes do express in development and birth, and we know that we know about conditions such as Down syndrome, which is a genetic issue, and I'm certainly not here claiming that we're able to undo anything like that. What I'm looking more at is the genes that express throughout our lives. Now, these ones that express after birth, they're switchable. They're the ones that you can code on and off, because remember, they're the ingredients for the cake. They're not a cake until you make them a cake. So if you're a person that believes or has been told that, you know, this is just in my genes, there's nothing I can do, it's in my family, there's nothing I can do, you know, have a look at the people that have actually impressed that belief on you, and ask about their lifestyle. You might even be able to just look at their lifestyle. You know, how do they live? What are their beliefs? Do they believe that they have no control over their life? Secondly, one thing I actually would encourage you to do is actually understand whether there are genetic markers that would lead to a particular condition, because if you don't have the genetic markers for something, that actually does make it a little bit more difficult to develop a particular condition. So that's something that's important to understand. But again, if the genetic marker is there, that does not always mean that there is nothing that you can do. And then also with a person, have a look at their emotional state as well. So if they're a very angry, resentful, critical sort of person, I mean, we saw just then what happens to the water when we do that. Imagine if you've done that to your body your entire life. And, you know, lifestyle factors, yeah? So do they drink? Do they smoke? Do they eat well? All of these things actually have an impact as well. Because remember, I was talking about the mind, body, spirit effect. So if we've got someone that has, you know, well set beliefs and attitudes within their life, you know, from that, the core of who they are, then that affects the spiritual aspect. If they're, their emotions are not conducive to their life, then that affects the mental and the physical aspect. But then, of course, if your environmental factors, including food and water and those sorts of things, they also affect our genetic expression as well. So now let's come a little closer to home. So your attitudes and your beliefs. Are you the person that's the glass half full? Are you the person that believes that things are difficult and that these things are always going to just happen to you? And these things are actually different to emotions. Basically, what happens, you know, sometimes we get these fleeting thoughts and they may or may not affect our emotions. And, you know, if they do affect our emotions, then that obviously has the effect that we've talked about in the body. But over time, that actually becomes cemented as a belief. Now, as a child, it's actually much easier for beliefs to be cemented because obviously our brains are still developing at that stage. So you may find that some of these beliefs that you potentially have been implemented at a very young age, but that doesn't mean that you can't have it, you can't do anything about it, right? It doesn't mean the cake is made and it's too late. What it's about is actually bringing that unconscious to conscious awareness so that you have the opportunity to reprogram. Because remember, these genes are switches, we can turn them on and off. So we've got the cake made. Is it made perfectly? Maybe not, but you know, what do we do about that? Now, there's a particular book which is talks a lot about this particular topic, and it's actually by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he talks about the biology of belief. So again, it's really about you creating your own reality, yeah? So if you believe that, for example, the sky is blue, like how do you actually know that the sky is blue? You don't. That's what you've been told. That's a really good example of a belief. And you also don't know that your perception of blue is exactly the same as everyone else's perception of blue, because we're all very individual people. So Bruce Lipton's work actually goes a lot into this in terms of looking at cellular structure, but also looking at quantum physics as well, because at the end of it, we're all matter. We're all a bunch of atoms and molecules that have just concentrated together, and energy is everywhere. So because of this this energy, we actually do have abilities on several levels to actually really influence how our lives play out. So your emotional state. So I was talking about this before, yeah? So, and this is about how your emotions really just replicate in your body. And remember again that these cells, they're interpreting the environment. So if you're angry and stressed and tense all the time, I mean, even if you just replicate that body language now, you'll feel that through your body, yeah? And if you're, you know, sad and fearful, we tend to either, you know, fear will tend to sort of withdraw a little bit from our lives, or we'll be headfirst into it. So, and that, you know, that's actually quite a stressful state in the body as well. You know, like when I was talking about the brokenhearted, we tend to close in on ourselves. And so our bodies, you know, with these cells is trying to understand what's going on all the time. So the cell membranes are actually interpreting how you're holding yourself and how you're feeling your emotions. And it also does this with things like childhood trauma. Now, I know a lot of us do have childhood trauma and traumas of all types, and I certainly do not mean to diminish any type of trauma that you've gone through, because a trauma is a trauma. However, it's about being able to make peace with it, to come to terms with it, or even to, if it's a childhood one, have a look at how it has programmed your beliefs in life as well. Because again, all of these things, they just build up in the body if we don't process them effectively in order for us to be able to, like I said, come to terms with them. So ultimately, we're all responsible for ourselves as adults, right? we're it. We're our own boss. So that's where it's quite important in terms of affecting your genes, that you do actually have a look at all of these things that just build up over time. So, and quite often you'll find people will, bring some of this trauma with them very physically in their body. They really carry it on their shoulders. And then again, if we actually think about how that replicates in the body, that is how we program our cells to respond and create the cake, basically. So now let's have a look at environmental factors, right? So I know that when I started, I said that, you can eat well and think well and, move well and all of that sort of thing, and still have these issues. Now, just because in kinesiology, we don't necessarily believe that these things are the core of the issue, doesn't mean that they're not important. We all know that food is fuel. Yeah, we all know that eating a rainbow, a good range of food, as close to nature as possible, that actually does program our cellular structure as well, because we obviously need enough nutrients of all the different balance to be able to have good cellular health. So our cells won't survive without decent quality food. So that's one factor that definitely is important. Organic is great. And I know that that is a challenge. As close to nature and as, fresh as possible is always great as well. So, and it's important for you to have a look at this in terms of the structure of your life, into what you're wanting to, because what we don't want to do is create stress. So stress of any type is not helpful. So if you're trying to eat organic, although I do agree with that, is particularly financially stressful or physically stressful because you're, not able to get hold of the food that you need, that to some degree can be just as stressful as not eating as well as you could. So my advice with that is do your best. And when you've got that down pat, if you can do better, then do better. Yeah. So, but I don't need to tell you that eating McDonald's 4 times a week is not going to be good for you. Okay, so liquid. Now that I've talked about our cells a lot, their cells are actually like balloons. And when we don't have enough water, particularly water in our body, our cells kind of like dehydrate a little bit like a balloon. And when a balloon's hard to pop, when it deflates a little, our cells can be like that as well. Now, remember that our membrane of the cell is about how it interprets our world. And if it's deflated a little bit, how does it interact with your body? And then secondly, how does it actually get the water into the cell to create the soup so that it can give the information to the soup to create, well, not the soup, but the ingredients to create the cake. Yeah. So enough good quality water is particularly important. And things, I'm sorry to say, but coffee does not count. Black tea does not count. And the things that do count really are, I would say, herbal teas. So also consider how much you're drinking as well. Alcohol is a toxin. We know that. Doesn't mean you should never drink again. Look, that probably depends on your health in general, to be honest. But, have an honest look at how much coffee you're having, how much alcohol you're having, things like that, because that has an impact on your body as well. Exercise. Now, for cells to have good health, we need movement. Does that mean you need to do CrossFit? No. It does mean that you need to move. So, and we need movement to create energy in our body and also to shift energy in our body. So when we don't move, we're stuck. And when we get stuck, we get frustrated. So some type of decent exercise we know is good for us health-wise on a number of levels. We know about mental health with it. We know about physical health with it, but also spiritual health and now cellular health. Consider the people around you. Your environment shapes your life. Yeah. So if you're surrounding yourself by people who cause you stress, that's not going to help you. We all do have people in our lives who probably are not the most helpful for us, but I'd have a look at the balance of power and then also how you choose to spend time with them. Okay, the environment around you. Are you living in an urban jungle? Are you surrounded by a bunch of devices? I personally have 3 around me right at the moment. Are you getting out into nature? Are you someone that sits inside all day? This has an impact as well. We need oxygen, so we need to get outside. We need to connect with nature. We are natural beings, yeah? And all the things, if you actually think about all the things in our environment that are good for us in food and water, the more natural they are, the better they are. So interacting with nature is particularly important for actually mental health particularly, but also cellular health. We actually have, I'm obviously a natural therapist, so I have a great affinity with this, but we have this great, what's called doctrine of signatures in nature, and we see it in a lot of things. Like we know that walnuts are good for your brain. In terms of flower essences, and I don't know if you're familiar with those, there's actually, everyone knows the bottle brush flower, yeah? Now, as an essence, that actually works as like an internal bottle brush. So this is what I mean by the doctrine of signatures. We can see how foods in their, even in their shapes and what they do and their colors and that sort of stuff, we know how important they are. So interacting with nature, even if it's gardening, you can go hug a tree. There's actually tree therapists that provide this. So, but, just appreciating the world around you and interacting with it will actually have an impact on how your genes work. The other thing I would definitely suggest is have a look at your products. We have a lot of chemicals, we have a lot of plastics, we have a lot of produced stuff. And if we actually think about our health over the last 100 years versus the technology, I suppose, that's accumulated over the last 100 years, our health hasn't improved at all, to be honest, in terms of the last 100 years versus the 5,000 years before that, because our advancement in this amount of time, our bodies can't keep up with it actually. So our bodies haven't learned how to process all of the products that we use, the technology that we use. I mean, even I am 45, and even in my lifetime, it's enormous. Even if we think about Facebook, that wasn't around before, I think it was 2004. That's what, a bit over 15 years ago. So all of these things add to the soup of stress within our bodies. And then, of course, because we know now that how our cells interact with this stress, then that is actually how it influences our genetic markers and how we turn them on and off. So, but anyway, back to products, just have a look at what you're using. Is there a better option? A good example is antibiotics, and antibiotics are necessary at times. But you know what we used to use before antibiotics? Colloidal silver. And colloidal silver, there are no known side effects. When you go and Google this, you will find there is a page full of information about how it will turn you blue. That's actually not true. It's ionic silver that will do that. But this is what we used to use before antibiotics. Cleaning products, baking soda and vinegar and lemon juice and water. We don't necessarily need all of the chemicals in my life and in your life. And I'm not saying go and throw everything out and cause incredible stress by doing this all today, but have a good, honest look at all of these aspects of your life, because they're all like little pieces of a puzzle and they all connect together. So, okay, now we've got some self-help tools. So this is me sitting at a tree near my clinic, actually, which I didn't know was there. So we have some other options, which are things that we don't think about all the time or consider. Things like meditation. And I know with my clients, a few of them struggle with meditation. Now, meditation is quite simply about you being able to connect back with your inner self and to find that space between your thoughts. If I talk to you about the monkey mind, you all know what I mean. So meditation is actually scientifically proven to antidote about 141 very common things in Western medicine. It influences diabetes, it influences heart issues, it influences blood pressure, it influences digestion, it influences even cancer as well. So that it's definitely something that I would look at bringing into your life. And the thing with it is everyone gets distracted. Everyone wanders off with their thoughts and that sort of stuff. It's perfectly normal. It's really just about retraining your brain that it is not in charge. So in Chinese medicine, we look at this, the heart is the emperor, it's the ruler, and we know this because when the heart stops, that's it. But the brain is the prime minister. Can make good decisions, sometimes doesn't. So it's good to remind your brain that it actually isn't in charge. And meditation is an excellent way of doing that. So 5 or 10 minutes of that a day would be awesome. So even mindfulness meditation, which is really about being very present in your life and being, again, aware of your surroundings. So you can do that just by getting out in nature. Breathing. Now, breathing is important for cellular structure as well, because what happens when we're stressed? We shallow breathe, we breathe hard and fast, we increase our heart rate, we send blood flow to our muscles, and what we actually do is lower the oxygen in our blood. Now, we know how important oxygen is. What happens when you get on a plane? You get told about how to put oxygen on if there's a problem. So, it's critical to life, but the way that we breathe actually influences how our body responds as well. And again, coming back to these little cells with their membrane, they're reading their environment. So if you're causing a stressful environment, then that's what your cell membrane is interpreting and then giving that information to the cell, which can turn on these switches of whatever problem may be underlying there. So a couple of breathing exercises that I suggest are actually quite important for yogic practices tend to use them a lot. But one that I call box breathing, which is just basically breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold for 4. Now, I actually learned this last week. The Navy SEALs use this exercise. You know how you see those movies where they're all like lying in the mud and they're wet and they're cold and they're dirty and they're having water sprayed in their face? They're actually doing this exercise while they're having that happen to them so that they have the ability to handle their stress response within their environment. Because I know that I've talked a lot about stress. However, we can't avoid it. It's about how we respond to it that actually affects how our genes code. So that type of breathing is actually really good at resetting your nervous system from a sympathetic stress state into a more parasympathetic state. And also because you're oxygenating your cells, your blood, then your cells are not susceptible to the toxins in life, which we call free radicals. So the other thing, obviously, that you can do is resolve these other factors that we've talked about. Have a look at your beliefs and your attitudes and your emotional state and your environment around you, the people around you, your food, your water, your the chemicals and products and all of that sort of thing that you're not aware of necessarily or not conscious of how much of this stuff is actually impacting you. And then when do we seek help? So I would say that when you seek help is when you're finding it too hard, right? So I have tried these things and it's not working. I have tried and I can't stick with it. I like to do things with support. That's also a good one. But then also you might actually apply a lot of these things and not even be aware of your emotional blocks or your beliefs or these things that are underlying that are just so coded into you that you're not even aware that they're there. So that's where seeking help in that regard can actually help, because then you can actually, like I said at the beginning, bring that unconscious to the conscious so that you're aware of this stuff, and then you have the opportunity to be able to do something with it. And also, you know, because it codes into your body, your body, there's a book called Your Body Keeps a Score, and it's actually so true. Your body just hangs on to this stuff. And again, obviously, if your cells have already coded this way, it is going to take a little while to uncode. So there are things that, particularly with natural therapies, that we can actually do to help you to recode your cells. Because the beautiful thing about your cells is that they replicate every 7 days, I think it is. And one thing that I did forget to mention is actually about stem cells. Stem cells are like these potential cells. They're not anything yet. And we're hearing a lot about stem cell research now. And that's because we can actually turn these cells into anything, into heart cells, into blood cells, into any type of cells. So by working through this stuff, and where I meant to talk about this was with the picture of the cake, right? The cake's made, right? But the cake just keeps replicating. So another way to look at that potentially is, what else can you do with a cake? You can turn it into a trifle. So you can turn it into other things. So by, assuming that once the cake's made, you can't do anything with it, that's not so true. We can work with it. Okay, so again, we've, the key to your genes, or hacking your genes, as I said, is a multitude of factors, but it's particularly about looking at your emotions, your attitudes, your beliefs, because like I said, that for us is actually the key. So you can eat well, you can hang out with the right people, you can get out in nature, you can exercise and drink well and not use chemical products and all of that sort of stuff. But if you don't address the emotions, the attitudes, the beliefs, that underpins everything else. So, oh yes, and also, so with this one down here, so this one again, that ancestral stuff, what has been handed down to you from your parents in terms of those, or if other family members in terms of attitudes and beliefs. So, an example, migraines. So I do see migraines handed down a lot. So, but are the stress patterns that go with migraines being handed down as well? And also, just because your mum had migraines doesn't mean that you're going to. So, or that your mum had migraines all her life, that doesn't mean that you're going to. I know my mum had migraines all her life. I did up until I was about 20. And actually, you know what? I couldn't really tell you why. I don't, but I would say that's because I've resolved the stress pattern that I had with it. So let's then, what's next? So you can get in touch with me here. You can find me as Kinesiology on pretty much every social media channel. You can get in contact with me with my website. There's my email, and obviously my phone number as well. So I am going to stop the recording. Give me 1 second. There we go. No, 1 second. I'm actually just going to stop the recording now.